I welcome you to the GEST lecture series. Today we have Nicolas Merz from the WZB. He will present on his research fellow in the project Manifesto Research on Political Representation. And he's also a PhD student at the Humboldt University of Berlin. He works on a dissertation on electoral programs and media coverage. I invited him, or actually the reason why I became aware of him is that his work, or this combined work, on the Manifesto Corpus was awarded the 2016 Statistical Software Award by the Society of Clinical Methodology. His R package manifesto. So I thought it might be interesting for the GEST colleagues, but I had a chance to see it afterwards. Thank you to you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I guess almost that the reason why we were invited is this statistical software prize. Although I have to admit that the software we wrote is not so much about statistics. It's much more about data access and whatever. So we were also a bit surprised that we won this, but
more interesting for GEST.
Yeah, it's probably more interesting for GEST. Yeah. So this R package that you mentioned and the corpus in general is a joint project by the whole Manifesto project team. So Pola Lehmann, Dirk Lewandowski, Therese Mattes, and Sven-Wedel and me. And we are, I think maybe they are also watching from the WZB, and the whole internet can see us here in this live stream, not only the at least 250 people sitting in this room. This talk today will be about briefly about the Manifesto project in general. Then I will present the Manifesto corpus, provide some exemplary applications on what cool stuff you can do with this corpus that you couldn't do before, and then also talk a little bit about how to access the Manifesto corpus. So the part that is maybe also interesting for GEST. In general, the goal of the Manifesto project is to extract or to measure party preferences from by using electoral programs. And I mean, certainly there's always a debate about, well, are electoral programs really like a good and valid measure to measure party preferences, and are they even relevant? Who cares about electoral programs? No one reads them, and why do they measure at all? And there's a lot of research on this, and like I think the essence in this is that manifestos do matter. They are covered by mass media. They do matter for policy making. Changes in electoral programs are perceived by voters. So in short, they are important, and it's relevant to look at them for many reasons. And they are a good source of what parties really want and which issues they think are important and which positions they have. So here, a very brief history of the Manifesto project. The project is running for a very long time. It was its origins are in 1979 when Ian Budge assembled a group at that time called the Manifesto Research Group. In 1989, it was renamed and relocated to the WZB, the WZB, the Berlin Social Science Center, under the directorship of Hans-Dieter Klingemann, and it was then called the Comparative Manifestos Project. And many people know it also by this name, and often also just called the CMP. Although since 2009 the project is now still at the WZB, but under a different label and a different grant and leadership. It's now called the Manifesto Research on Political Representation. Short form is MAPOR, and it has a really generous funding by the German Research Foundation. And as you can see here above that, most of the people who have worked here on this corpus are younger than the project. This is just to highlight that it's running for a really long time, and well, saw some changes, but also some continuity in this time, and I will highlight this in a moment. So the general methodology of the project is very, I will only roughly discuss this here. So we sample, our sampling strategy is that we look at electoral programs from And now it's more than 50 democratic countries. It has a strong focus on OECD countries, but it also goes beyond. We are also now extending to Latin American countries. For example, we have a lot of Central and Eastern European countries that are not part of the OECD. But there is a strong focus on Europe, but we also have countries such as the US, Mexico, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. In general, we look at electoral programs at parliamentary lower house elections and at all elections, at all democratic elections since 1945, which is sometimes that means 1990 if we consider that many of these elections were not democratic in some of these countries. So, and we look at parties that are represented in parliament in general. So, the coding unit of is the statement, or we call this the quasi-sentence. So the whole document is split into statements, and these statements are then assigned to one of 56 policy categories. There are some subcategories, but I don't want to go into detail there. So if you have questions, you can ask. And these categories are, for example, labeled military positive. That means all statements that make positive references to the military are coded with this code, or military negative are negative references to the military, etc., etc. So there are not only these 6 here, but 50 other categories that cover like most policies and issue areas. And the coding is done by trained expert coders. So these are native language speakers that are familiar with the political parties within these countries. And they are trained, so they know the coding scheme, the category scheme, and the scheme. They learn how to apply this to an electoral program. So just to illustrate how does this work in practice, this is a text passage from I think it's an Icelandic manifesto, but I'm not even sure about it. Just took this from another presentation, but this is only one passage here, and like before, in the former times of the Manifesto project, they splitted this passage into statements, like indicated by these separators here, and then they just wrote the codes next to the sentence or the statements, and in the end, they just counted together these different codes, and then they got a frequency distribution, or some kind of distribution of how much emphasis a party puts on which issues. And one of the most used output that the project produced is like a measure of a left-right position that simply aggregates some issues that are considered as left and some issues that are considered as right, so that you are subtracted from each other, so that you get an idea of whether a party talks more about left issues or whether it talks more about right-wing issues. So that was the most important, and it's an output from the project for a very long time, and is still the most important output, I think. And you can here see, for example, this for Germany. These are the 5 German established parties. The left party, or PDS, has indeed the most left-wing position. The Green Party has like a position that sometimes intersects with the Social Democrats. The FDP, the Liberals, have a position that is to the right of the Social Democrats and sometimes to the left to the Christian Democrats, etc. You can also see, for example, the position of the mainstream of the larger parties are a little bit more shifting than the positions of the smaller parties. And this kind of data we have for like these 50 countries and so on. This kind of data produced like a large amount of, on the one hand, methodological discussion, on the other hand, also a lot of substantive research that use these positions to test theories of party competition. And so when in 2009 the project was renamed and got this bigger funding, we have changed some things, some small things, but we have changed one major thing. And that is we digitalized this whole coding workflow. And this is now different, that's different, and that's different, but most of this has stayed the same. So the general methodology is the same, like more or less in 1979. Still some small adaptations, but more or less it's the same. The big change in 2009 was really the change to a digital coding workflow. And that means now, when in former times people just copied the manifesto and annotated it on the margins of the page, now we digitize the manifesto. So that means we collect it already as a PDF from the websites of the parties, or we scan the printed documents. We use OCR, so optical character recognition software, to convert them into machine readable documents, and the annotation as well is also completely done on digital versions of these documents. And then for sure the counting of the codes is not by hand, but also done automatically. So this is, it seems like, well, it's just a technical thing, this change, but it has some huge implications and a lot of advantages. However, it's also a lot of work. So here, that's the point where I want to thank all the student assistants who do all the digitizing work. That's really like an incredible work, and it's so much more work than the old workflow. But in a minute, I will show you why this is so much better, and why we can do really cool things with this digital data collection now. So as I said, now we have a digital collection of texts, and the format is like the following. We have documents, and these documents have some metadata, and we have two types of documents. So we have, on the one hand, documents these are just machine readable text, and we have, and that's the new thing, we have machine readable text that are split into statements and linked to the codes of the that are assigned by the coders. And the metadata is information about which party published this election manifesto, at which election, and the language of the document, the type of coding that was applied, and it also links back to the original PDF, so you can have a look at the original layout of PDF if you wanna have a look on the pictures as well that are sometimes in the documents, for example. And the whole corpus is also linked to the main data set, so that you can use all the information that's in the main data set, such as the electoral results and so on. So the coverage of the corpus is currently the most recent version covers 1,980 electoral programs. Not all of them are machine readable. Not all of them are annotated, so with the codings, but about 40% of them are including the codings on the statement level. So it contains electoral programs from 48 countries, like more or less the same coverage as the general data set. There is a strong focus on Europe, but as I said before, like also countries such as US, Canada, Australia, etc. In some countries, we have some more data because we have a special interest in it, for example, in Germany, or because for whatever reason. But in general, we have data from 35 different languages, and these are not only like not only Latin alphabet languages, but also, for example, Georgian or Armenian that have really strange alphabets and strange, which can lead to strange coding problems and things like that. And so the time coverage. So usually this digital workflow was introduced in 2009. It covers more like the recent elections, not only starting in 2009, but going back to about 2000, 2005. And there we're close to full coverage in digital documents, but everything that is before this is mostly not yet digitalized. So and so now what can you do with this corpus? There are many things that you can do with this. I will focus on three exemplary applications. One is a simple term frequencies, so you can simply look at how often some terms appear in these documents, as they are now machine readable. You could have done that before, but that would mean that you go through the document, you read everything, and then make it. So that's a lot of work. But this can now all be done automatically. I just show examples that are almost fully automatically possible. So this is it's too small to see what this exactly is, but it's just the frequency of the term digital, in the German electoral programs from 1950 to today. And as you can see, that's, well, no surprise, but this term was simply absent until the 1980s, and then popped up, and now has a high importance, or at least compared to an increasing importance, let's say. So you can also look at certain terms that are used in specific categories, and that's really a really nice thing, because often we want to have produce some kind of keywords for specific issues, and this can help us to easily produce a list of keywords for certain issues. For example, these are the most distinct words in English that are used in the statements that are in favor of the military. And the face validity of this is really high, as the terms are defense, military forces, armed, NATO, and veterans. And I mean, that's really makes sense to me. And you can not only have this in English, but in all these other languages. For example, here for environment, in English it's emissions, water, rivers, carbon, environmental, and energy. In German it's CO2, Energien, Tiere, Emissionen, Klimaschutz, and Artenvielfalt. So it really produces you a list of words that are distinct to this category for a large number of languages. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, but with a really high face validity, I think, at least for the languages that I know and understand. I can't really check this for example, Croatian. I have no idea what okolia means, but probably environment, or I don't know. It gets you a really quick idea on which concepts are also important in these documents, and you can dig much deeper than just knowing, well, the environment is important, but you can get an idea of what type of concepts within the domain of the environment are important. And finally, you can also look at differences in the terms used between parties. So here you can see terms used by 4 Dutch parties that all make statements about multiculturalism. And you can see that, although they are all coded as multiculturalism, they use a very different language. And we highlighted here, or we choose here the words that are discriminating between these parties. So, for example, the right-wing populist party here is talking about the Islam and ideology, while the Social Democrats are more like talking about the school, community, children, minorities. So I think that this opens up really a lot of new ways how to analyze the data and find out more things about how parties frame specific issues, for example. So another thing that one can use is text reuse methods. So text reuse means is, for example, the most, I think, popular application of text reuse methods are cheating detection software. So whether someone plagiarizes from someone else, because it compares bits of text with other bits of text, or documents with documents. And in parliamentary research, this was, for example, used to analyze which bills end up in a legislative act. In terms of electoral programs, one can use this to, for example, analyze how a draft that is presented at a party convention changes to the final enacted program. And we usually only look at the finally enacted program and analyze this one. And by comparing this with the original draft that was presented by the party leadership before the party convention, we can say something about how the party convention and the debates at the party convention and the influence of the party activists changed the party manifesto, changed the outcome of the manifesto. And we use a fuzzy string matching algorithm, so we go through every statement in the final document and check whether this was already in the draft. And the gray lines here indicate that this was altered, so that a statement was not in the draft, and the white line indicates that a statement was already in the draft. And here, for example, we see that there's a big difference between the two parties that we look at here, just as an example. That for the Green Party there was a huge change in terms of programmatic content, while for the SPD the draft that was presented by the leadership only marginally changed at the party convention. Then the nice thing about our coding on the statement level is that we can also look at in which issue areas this change happened. So, for example, we can see here the turquoise bars are the ones that are already in the draft, and the red ones are the ones that were added during the party convention or altered during the party convention. And we can see here that the change doesn't happen equally in all categories. But for example, it seems that the party activists were more interested in environmental issues and put a lot of put a lot of ideas or emphasis on these issues, and compared to the levels like in the draft before, not so much on, for example, issues of equality in regard to the Green Party. And yeah, for example, you can see that the Social Democratic Party activists didn't alter the program at all in regard to peace, for example. So another task, another exemplary application is semi-automatic classification. So the question whether we can use existing codings to train an automatic classifier to code new documents. And it's a really fancy method at the moment, I think, and it could save us a lot of work and time if this would work. So that was one of the first things we tried out when we had this new data. And our setup was that we used data from the 1998 to the 2009 elections in Germany, and on the full 56 category scheme, and train a classifier to code the documents from the 2013 elections. And the outcome is, well, it's not perfect, but there is 40% agreement. That's really not, for these classification tasks, is not super good. But on the other hand, one has also have in mind that the 56 policy category scheme is really difficult. Also for humans, and there's a lot of noise in there. For example, if two categories are not 100% mutually exclusive, then there will be a lot of noise. And however, if you aggregate some of these categories up, the noise should be reduced, and you should get better estimates. And if you compare, for example, the code frequencies and so how many codes were coded by the human and how many codes were coded by the computer, you get a pretty decent correlation on this code frequency level. Or if you aggregate even higher to some left-right positions, you can see that these are also not totally off. So the filled circles here are the computer codings, and the hollow circles are the human coding. And I mean, there are some cases, for example, CDU, where it's pretty far off, and it also changes like the rank order here. But for the first try, I think it's pretty convincing, and probably a good idea to follow up on this, and also try whether this works also for other languages. So that was the last application. I'm now showing you how you can access this data. And I think we faced some challenges on how to structure this access part, because the data structure is pretty complex, so we have documents and metadata, and it's not just one data set that you can download as it was in the past. Then coverage is not consistent as it was in the past, that you simply had all documents or like a full coverage, more or less, multi-language content, which is always a challenge. We have very heterogeneous users, so some users are just used to the old data set and want to have a look at the particular document and just check on why this document and their analysis ends up a bit weird. On the other end of the scale, we have users that are like very sophisticated and want to use our data to do some text analysis. And additionally, the corpus is constantly updated. So until the first release of the corpus in Spring 2015, we had, I think, 10 like official versions launched, and I think another 20 development versions that are accessible. And we also face some copyright restrictions. That's the reason why we can't make it totally open access and just put it in the internet and whoever can download it, but that's an issue that we also have to face. So it's not completely open access in a strict sense, but it's very like it's free, easy, and a simple registration process. So similar to Jesus, I would say. And we offer different tools to access the data, and I will present some of them very briefly here. So the most general approach to access the data is a web API. It's a programming interface, and I guess very few people can actually use this, but it's a very general approach how you can download the data. I think, for example, this is really cryptic, and if you just go to the API website and get this, then very little that you can do with this. But we provide some tools that convert this into something meaningful. And I think that the fact that we do provide an API was already worked because someone else, for example, wrote a Python script for this API. We didn't, but someone just came up and downloaded this and used the API, which I think is really cool. So we provide an R package that can connect to this API, and it's called Manifestor. It's on CRAN, so you can easily download it just by typing install packages Manifestor and then load it with library Manifestor. And you also have to download an API key. It's similar to using the Twitter API, for example, from our website. And then you can, for example, download the metadata and or download some, for example, here the documents of the Green Party for the last German Bundestag election. And with some easy codes, you just get like the codes or the text, or you should also get both together. So it's really easy and handy. We also now have this data package, thanks to Alejandro Ecker, who is also here. It's also it has a very similar functionality than Manifestor. You can easily install it just with these two commands. And it's for all the people who are sick of R and still doing this data. And now if you don't want to use the statistics tool but just get an impression, you can also download or view the data and browse the data on our dashboards on the website. So for example, here you can choose a program and then just see the text and the codes and read it and have fun. Or you can use another dashboard that lets you filter by keywords, and then you just get, for example, here all the sentences where the word terror appears, like for all languages. But you can also filter more specifically. Here you also get an indication of that terror most often appears in the code 605, which is law and order, which makes sense somehow. Well, then finally, you can also download the data from the website. It's hard to show, and yeah, that's it. And thank you very much. Looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation.
yet.
I'm sorry. No, there you go ahead.
I was just, so the first drafts are available online as well? The preliminary drafts before they go to the party convention?
It's not in the corpus, but yeah, usually like the one that goes to the party convention, that's usually available. Yeah. So because I mean it's discussed at a more or less public party convention. So, but you still sometimes have to digitize it in a proper format. But often it's available. Yeah.
But do you collect those systematically?
No.
Okay. So this is just a sample.
That was just an example on what you can do with it. Yeah. But I know someone who does. I think Margaret Hornsteiner from the University of Bamberg. She should have all of the drafts.
Just out of curiosity, since you mentioned that, so how does it work with those copyright issues? So would you check that with each and every party, or what are there any rules for that, or how?
So that's a good question to be taped on video forever. So when we started the distribution, we asked our Justitia at the Social Science Center, and they said that restricting access to the scientific community is sufficient to fulfill copyright issues or to fulfill the copyright. And I mean, one thing is that we never, in the whole time, we never got a request from a party to take down a document. And I think it would also be, why would a party do that? I mean, even if they maybe dislike that their old document is still online and they fear that someone could look up that something they said in the past and change their position, I think the risk that this goes public is really high. Because if then we say, well, look, they want us to take this down and we go public with this, yeah, that never happened. So but we also get requests from another project on political parties. They are collecting the statutes, the political party database project, and they had the same question and issues. And I think sometimes it is a problem that copyright issues can a little bit pose some problems for science and sharing data.
How do you systematically keep this updated?
So we are once or twice a year we are updating the main data set, and that's also when we do big changes to the manifesto corpus, but there are also many changes in between when we correct some data or some mistakes or replace individual documents where we have the impression that the coding wasn't good or that the document as such wasn't good at all. And all these versions are then stored in a Git repository and stored there hopefully forever, but probably not forever, but to be stored forever we probably have to give it to Jesus at a certain time. So and the good thing about this is that also users can also easily access all the old versions of the corpus. So as long as someone indicates his the version number in his R or do file, you can exactly replicate his work, and you don't have to put all the, for example, all the textual data in a replication repository, because we provide the exact same data all over time.
Can the users add algorithms, or is this in any way that there's a contribution from outside in the respective algorithms?
I mean, The R package and the Stata package, they are on GitHub, and I mean someone could make a push request and or a merge request. I don't know how that's called in GitHub, and cooperate and say, hey, I have this cool scaling function or whatever, and we would be happy to accept such contributions. But so far, I think has not yet happened. But maybe if we announce this now to the whole world.
Don't reach your own child yet. Okay.
So do you think that the parties are aware that you're collecting this data? I mean, sometimes you said you had to contact them directly, but...
Yeah, so sometimes we contact them directly, and for example, if it's unclear what their program is, for example, then you ask, well, don't you have a program for this election because we're collecting this? But I think they don't care. I think that we hardly get any further requests from these parties. I know that some German parties know it, but that's more because of some personal connections into the parties from the Social Science Center, not for any specific research interest. So,
Are there any attempts to, I mean, the work on the manifesto corpus is separate from this work, or is it? I mean, are there any attempts to open up, kind of like what you cover, or that you have lots of speeches, or maybe go into the lower level politics?
So on different, on the federal level, on the state level or so, yeah. I mean, there are other projects, for example, the Euro Manifesto project here in Mannheim. They are coding the documents for the European parliamentary elections. There are also some people who collect this for the regional elections. But I think it can't be our main focus to collect many other documents. I think in general one could think of whether the infrastructure as such can be broadened, like in the future, to in general be applicable to other types of documents. And if someone, I think if someone wants to collect, I don't know, speeches or something and is interested in using in our infrastructure, I think we could also help to whether they can use our infrastructure or whether they can copy our infrastructure. So, but I think we are already so have such so many countries to cover at national elections. That's already.
I guess it would be interesting then once you have this infrastructure to access and to use the data, that you could be used for many things, like
for all kinds of
things in a way. Everything that can be coded as policy action should have it.
Yeah.
If you don't have any questions, thank you for this interesting presentation. Thank you for the discussion.
Thanks again for inviting me, and